Ladies and gentlemen, from the depths of flyover country in the heartland of America, the Kansas City on the other side of the mighty Mo, welcome to Hittin the Bricks with Kathleen, the genealogy show that features your questions and her answers. I am John, your humble hubby host, and on this episode, we'll be talking to Charlotte from the Empire State, the Excelsior State, the Knickerbocker State, anyway, the great state of New York. So let's start hitting the bricks.
So Charlotte, I'm Kathleen. You've met John already. And Charlotte, I'm going to let you tell us a little bit more about yourself before we get started.
Sure. I have been an English as a new language teacher for almost my entire teaching career, which means my adult students come from all different countries. I can have students from 10 different countries in one class learning English. And all these many years, we've always talked about our culture, ethnicities, religion, different races. And I've always had to come from my adoptive perspective because that's all I had ever known until DNA. So I wanted to find out for sure what my ethnicities were. And I wasn't so surprised because my adoption papers gave me an idea of what my background might look like, but the DNA confirmed it. And so I started to make like real life connections on such a personal level with my students.
That's neat.
Okay, well, it is kind of interesting that she brought in her adopted background. And I was interested in knowing, first of all, you said that you had your adoption papers. Mm-hmm. So you have a relationship, or do you know your biological parents?
I do. Now I do. Because of DNA, I was able to connect with a first cousin, a maternal first cousin through Ancestry. And that opened up the doors to meeting many of my biological relatives on my maternal side. And then when I actually got to meet my biological mother and immediate family, I learned a few details about my paternal side. Okay, and so if you really want to know.
Yes, we really want to know. We're a gossiping group here,
We're not going to tell anybody.
Here's the skinny. I'm my own detective. I am a researcher by trade. I look for details. And so when one person can't tell me the whole story, I look to everyone else to fill in the gaps. So when I didn't have enough information about my biological paternal side, because unfortunately at that point, it was the 2 DNA tests that I had taken, didn't reveal to me who my paternal side was. So I took small details, put them together, and I learned where my biological father had lived here on Long Island, and I knocked on doors. Now, of course, I don't recommend that to 99.99% of people in this society.
I was going to say, how did that go?
It went swimmingly well.
Fantastic.
Amazing, because out of the 5 houses that I knocked on their doors, one family happened to be home, and it was a family that had grown up on that street.
And I am going to suggest we just not do that, but I'm really happy that it worked for you. That's a fun way of doing it.
It was fun. I said a prayer beforehand. I made sure I had God's protection on me.
Totally protected.
And what was amazing is that as soon as I was able to make a connection with someone on the street, there was such a snowball effect. Within a couple of days, I had spoken with my biological father.
Wow.
I think this is fabulous. A lot of people aren't even successful in doing that, but in small towns, they do it. I mean, we all do it in small towns, especially because the older neighbors do know the information that you're looking for. So I'm going to ask you, what is your actual question, Charlotte?
So my question is, how can my biological first cousin maternally match with me also paternally? Because I know who my biological father is now. He does not. I know that there were many friends that lived on the block together, but unfortunately, my biofather doesn't know who my cousin's biofather is. But when I look on the DNA websites, my cousin and I have the same matches, but different CMs. So
Yes.
how can this be?
You mentioned to me that some of these matches are your first, second cousins or second, third cousins, and they're his fourth, fifth cousins. And for the purpose, we're just going to use a first name and say Jimmy. Charlotte, one of the things you mentioned as an adoptee that for you to get your answers is that you took several DNA tests. How many tests did you actually take?
I had taken 4. I took Ancestry for the ethnicity and to hopefully find some matches.
Right.
A year after, I had taken 23andMe for the health portion, but along with that came matches.
Of course.
And then it wasn't until I came in contact with my biological father that we tried Ancestry with him. But as an older person, it was just too difficult for him to complete the ancestry test. He tried, it didn't work. So I researched and found that family tree DNA, because it was a swab, worked better for elderly people. And because we live in separate areas, I live in New York and he lives in Puerto Rico. So I had to send him directions and he had to do it independently. Family tree DNA. I did that one with him. But then I also did my heritage.
And Charlotte, you did exactly what we suggest. As adoptees, we want you to take not 1, not 2. We really want you to take as many as you can. Ancestry, as you said, has this large database of DNA cousin matches, whereas you get that what is needed that adoptees don't normally have is a health history from a couple of them in 23andMe is one. I am going to talk about my heritage a lot more as we get into this. You also mentioned your biological father.
Yes.
Is Puerto Rican. And they lived on the same block as your mom.
Yes.
Actually, you mentioned to me that your first cousin, Jimmy, that he too is adopted.
Yes. Yes.
And his mother and your mother are siblings.
Correct.
So it was more than fun working on this project, because your question is, how is it that Jimmy's your first cousin on the sister's side? You have between 814 to 853 shared centimorgans. That's perfect for first cousins. And now the question is, but why on your father's side is Jimmy also related to the same cousins as you are?
Yes.
How does that happen?
Yeah, I'd like to know.
It happens, don't we all? So I am going to give you some answers, Charlotte, on that. I do want to ask a few other questions. Where do you think Jimmy is related?
Okay, so I thought I was hot on the trail. I really thought I was able to form a pattern. And just when I thought I had the pattern, man, new matches popped up and then I got all confused. So at first I thought he matched on my paternal grandfather's side, but then I have a lot of matches that I thought he matched on my paternal grandmother's side. A couple generations back, I know that both sides of my Puerto Rican family married each other through distant cousins. That's at least what the paper trail and some of my matches reveal. Bottom line, I'm confused.
Okay, it is a very close community, and there's a lot of marrying going on in this little community. So let me walk you through this.
Your family tree kind of looks like that, Kathleen, doesn't it?
What, a large circle?
Where the tree actually, the highest branch starts meeting the roots.
You're hurting my feelings, John.
Well,
Just hurt.
Hey, it happens, right?
Well, it actually does. And no, my family tree has branches.
I know it has
like
branches.
Does.
I'm not being ugly here. So how does this happen?
How does this happen? We know quite a bit about Charlotte's biological parents. Charlotte, she knows her father is Puerto Rican and her mom is European. And she's from where in Europe?
Germany, specific parts of Estonia, and St. Petersburg, Russia.
So strongly European. There's no Puerto Rican there. We know that Puerto Rican is a Caribbean island, and the inhabitants of Puerto Rico call themselves Puerto Ricans.
Well, yeah.
But for the ease of this,
guess what? The people who aren't in Puerto Rico call Puerto Ricans Puerto Ricans.
exactly. But
Yeah,
for the ease of this conversation, John, we are going to be discussing the Puerto Rican makeup. Their DNA is not called Puerto Rican. It has a makeup.
Oh, no. Okay.
So what I'm referring to is Iberian, Mesoamerican, Amazonian, and African. Those are the Puerto Rican or non-European DNA of Charlotte and Jimmy.
Okay.
So in having said that, I'm just going to put this in parentheses that I will be using for ease the word Puerto Rican or Puerto Rico DNA to differentiate Charlotte and Jimmy's European DNA. Having said that, Charlotte's DNA shows us that she has inherited 50% DNA from her Puerto Rican father and 50% European DNA from her mother.
Okay.
But when we look at Jimmy's, we get different measures. The first thing I did was ask Charlotte, what is Jimmy's haplogroup? The haplogroup was the key to my answer.
Okay, brakes on. Haplogroup.
A haplogroup tells us what region they came from. Are they European? Are they Jewish? Are they African? And this is given by the DNA companies. They all agree. So Jimmy is total European on his father's side. He took a Y-DNA test. And that Y-DNA said is Jimmy, his biological father, his biological grandfather, and father to father to father, all the way back down to DNA Adam is European. So we know that side's not Puerto Rican. So at this point, out of the 4 grandparents of Jimmy and Charlotte, we have the Flores, who we know is Puerto Rican. We know the 2 women are 100% European. I went to MyHeritage. And in MyHeritage, at the bottom of your chart, Charlotte, you can compare yourself to what you inherited and what Jimmy inherited. That was the key. So you have about 52% that you inherited from your dad. The other 48 or so came from your mom. On Jimmy, however, he only inherited about a quarter of the Puerto Rican. At 50%, you inherit your parents, mother, father. At 25% is grandparents. So I now know that Jimmy received that Puerto Rican from one of his 4 grandparents. Wow. We've already ruled out his mother because that is the same grandparents that you have, right?
Yes.
So that's 2 grandparents out for Jimmy. We've also already ruled out his father's side because his grandfather, we know that haplogroup. The only person left is who the grandfather married. So now we're looking at Jimmy's grandmother because the other 75% he has is European, but he is 25. He inherited 25%. What looks like from one person. And the reason I'm saying that is the way we've ruled out the other 3.
And so you're saying his paternal grandmother.
Mother. Exactly. Now I'm going to show you a quick trick that I do. And that is I make a fake tree. I don't even have to know the names. As a matter of fact, I didn't know the names. So basically what it says is we're not working with anything on Jimmy except his paternal grandmother. And so what I put, my tree is like this. There's Charlotte and there's Jimmy, 2 different trees. Charlotte tree says Flores dad, European mom. That's all it says. And then on the grandmother's side, it says 2 Europeans. On the grandfather's side, it says 2 Puerto Ricans. Jimmy's paternal grandmother is 100% Puerto Rican.
Oh.
Jimmy's father is 50% Puerto Rican, half European on his father's side.
Because the paternal grandfather was 100% European.
Exactly. Now that means Jimmy is 25% Puerto Rican. You see how I divided that?
Yes.
But we have a few problems. Have you or Jimmy received your original birth certificates?
I actually did not need mine. I did not apply for mine, being that I know who mine are. I took the paternity test.
Right.
But Jimmy I believe he ordered his from New York, but I could be wrong.
I would say get it anyway. Jimmy's might tell him more information because he knows the mother's name through you, but he doesn't know the father's name. This is my problem. The father was biracial, right? He's half Puerto Rican, half European, which makes it a little tricky because in your area, in this time frame, it is possible that he also was adopted out. Charlotte, your mother was born around what, 1940s?
1950.
50, and another 20 years, 25 years from there, or 20 years from there. So let's say 1930s or earlier, where there was a lot of maternal homes because a lot of children were born after World War I or during that time frame. They were born out of wedlock. So that's why I'm saying the father may not be on that birth certificate. And it's possible that Jimmy's father was also adopted out. We don't know.
Right.
So
sure.
Jimmy definitely wants to receive his birth certificate.
Is there a path after that when you're looking for, or is that jumping to a conclusion at this point? Is that a viable path of research?
Yes, it is a viable, great question. It's a viable path of research because not only can Jimmy get his birth certificate, he is descendant of his father's. He can get that birth certificate.
Okay.
So he wants to get his father's birth certificate also. If the father's name is on his birth certificate, which it probably was at that point, because by this time it wasn't as taboo. And you can also check Catholic records if you don't have success on the birth certificates. They normally were registered, even if they were adopted out. It would not be my first place. My first place was to get Jimmy's birth certificate and to obtain his father's birth certificate if his name is given on that record. That would be the direct way to do it. So I'm just going to summarize a little bit of what I'm saying. Okay, I tried to first eliminate through haplogroups where Jimmy's Puerto Rican side could possibly be. And that 25% we know is a grandparent, everybody else was European. And so we have one person who's a candidate, and that is his paternal grandmother. I also mentioned that you always want to create trees. The best part about testing on all four is you have a lot of DNA cousins to help you work with trees. Jimmy will also. So what you're working with is to build Jimmy's trees. So based on the DNA cousins, that's not easy, but definitely possible. Do not accept the trees that are already posted, verify them, but it's definitely possible once you realize where it is. Now, I mentioned also, I love MyHeritage. MyHeritage has a way of doing one tool that I absolutely love, and that's the cluster tool. The cluster tool will put the family units together or the matches. So from there, you're not doing this without direction. You're trying to figure out, well, which one of these people have the Puerto Rican side in them also. And the MyHeritage tool has that.
Is that why when I'm cooking a meal, you come down to the kitchen and say, this is nothing but a cluster? You're encouraging me.
No, I am not encouraging you, Mr. Brandt.
John, you come out with these really interesting comments. I've been taking note from your other podcasts.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
He's revealing our 25-year marriage dynamic.
Yeah. We'll see if we do the 26th one. We'll see if I'm re-upped for that one.
Yeah, we only up once a year.
I might be forced into retirement.
Now, your third suggestion is Jimmy's original birth certificate.
Yes, because New York does have the open records now. So
what if it doesn't say anything?
You're going to build trees. The trees and the DNA is going to help. With Jimmy's side, you have his Y side, right? You know you're going to eliminate that whole side. So remember I said we're trying to eliminate first. And now we're only wanting to concentrate who actually has the Puerto Rican blood on the other three tests. On Jimmy's test, he has the Y if they show up in his MyHeritage or 23andMe, we're going to eliminate those people because that's not the family line you're looking for. You can actually solve this problem because you're only working with one person. It's an unknown person, but you're going to eliminate the 3 known. So what you're looking for is those DNA cousins that Jimmy has that's Puerto Rican that you don't have. You're part of the...
All right, say that one more time. Look for...
You're looking for the DNA cousins that Jimmy has that you don't necessarily even have. And the reason is because we know the ones that you both have already, but Jimmy should have some that doesn't match in that circle. And that is going to give you where to start building trees. The Flores side is not going to help you. It's just because you and Jimmy have the same Flores matches, but at different levels.
I think I'm still confused.
Okay.
So how does finding someone who isn't a match for me help the situation?
Jimmy's mother, who's half European and half Puerto Rican, those Puerto Rican people also married other people, right?
Yes.
The ones that you all have in common doesn't lead you to his mother directly. You're doing this elimination because you're going to find all the Floreses that you two have in common. But Jimmy should have some other people that the Floreses married on the other side. Who are they? Even though you and Jimmy are first cousins, you both have other first cousins that you're not related to.
She's not related to his and he's not related to hers.
Exactly. So Jimmy is going to be related to first cousins that are based on his father and his mother's side.
Okay.
Right?
And so by looking at the matches, right off the bat, I see on his ancestry 2 cousins that I don't have.
Right. Are they Puerto Rican?
Exactly. That's what we would have to look at. That's what you're saying. We have to look at.
Yes. You are wanting to pull out as many Puerto Rican cousins that Jimmy has to get you closer to build trees because you can build out the Flores side. Now you need to build out the other people. Jimmy's paternal grandmother is 100%. So she has Puerto Ricans on both sides of her family. That's what you're looking for, not the side that you have with Jimmy, but also the other side. And when you start looking at that combination, you're going to build those trees to get to who was his mom. So at this point, you're looking at second cousins because second cousins have the same great grandparents. First cousins have the same grandparents. Second cousins have the same great-grandparents. So you're looking for Jimmy's second great-grandparent Puerto Rican family.
Oh, that sounds easy.
No, it's not as hard as it's. I told you beforehand that it's going to be hard for me to explain this, but it really does make sense when you just sit down and first start off with your own tree like I did, that this is my tree. These are all the people I'm eliminating. If Jimmy and I match on any of these people, I'm eliminating. All you know is Jimmy's paternal grandmother is 100% Puerto Rican.
So Jimmy's father inherited 50% Puerto Rican from the mother and 50% from the father.
That's correct.
Because it's his father. And so looking at the era, the culture, it is quite possible that a biracial baby would have been given up for adoption, placed outside the family, in which case there's a big gold question mark as to where Jimmy's father, where he fits in. So very interesting. And if you're doing a search back in the 1940s and 50s, there were only a few homes for unwed mothers, Catholic, between Nassau and Suffolk counties.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So strictly looking at ancestry, because I just quickly did that to refresh my own memory, looking at our shared matches on Ancestry, one cousin and I share 336 centimorgans, and that same cousin only shares 24 with Jimmy.
Right.
Another cousin shares 251 centimorgans with me and only shares 23 with Jimmy. And so just looking at like 5 people, that seems to be the pattern.
And those are the people you want to build your tree.
Okay.
Because those are Jimmy's great-grandparent. He will have what we call a most recent common ancestor with those people are going to be great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents on Jimmy.
At that 25-ish, Centimorgans is going to be great-grandparents.
Yes. You and Jimmy together share about 800 Centimorgans, right?
Yes.
So by the time we're breaking it down, and there is a chart, and I will send it to you by Blaine Bettinger.
Okay.
You will see how big that range is. It's really big. And the thing is none of this is black and white, because they also might be first cousins twice removed, second cousins 3 times removed.
Boy.
It gets more and more complicated. But you're wanting to look at trees, and then you want to verify the trees that you have. And then you might have to come back and build the trees that you have gathered that are not correct, but look like a good match. So, Charlotte, basically what I'm saying is first you need to eliminate. So you're going to eliminate anyone who's related on the European side. We got that, right?
Yes.
And so we're only working not with your Puerto Rican, but Jimmy's Puerto Rican. I'm going to send you a chart so you can see about how much shared Centimorgans you should have, that Jimmy should have with the right cousins that he's interested in on the Puerto Rican side. You're looking for second cousins on Jimmy's side, on that Puerto Rican side. And don't worry about whether or not you're related to him. But if you know your side and you can't put Jimmy in it, go to someone else's tree. Let me just put it like that. I think that's clearer.
Okay.
Because you can build out your tree because you know your florist side. And as you're building out your tree further also, because you'll want to know your great-grandfather and his family, you're going to build out Jimmy's trees. But just keep in mind that you're not at the same generation.
Now I understand that his Puerto Rican percentages come from a different generation than mine, whereas my direct biological family, they still live on the same mountain in Puerto Rico. They're there.
Any plans to visit?
We have. Through this whole process, Jimmy and I have been so close, more like brother and sister versus cousins, and we really lift each other up. He applauds and is my biggest cheerleader. I have visited Puerto Rico 3 times.
Oh, fantastic.
With my family. Each time we visit, I meet other relatives. I finally met the one aunt who I look like.
Oh, wow.
Growing up adopted, I've always wondered who I looked like. Mm-hmm. And I never looked like my beautiful adoptive family.
Right.
I was the only blonde in an entire Italian family. And so, and that I was like a Capitone baby in the summertime. Mm-hmm. And so I've been enjoying this journey. I've taken Jimmy and my other family members along for the ride with me. And through this whole time, and without me crying, our lives have overlapped in so many different ways that Jimmy from my biological maternal side and my biological paternal side, we all lived in the same community growing up without knowing it. My mother gave birth to me, on the other side of the county, but little did anyone know that I was actually adopted and brought back into the same community that she was raised in. So having said that, back then, Jimmy and I were raised only a few miles away from each other. Although we went to different elementary and middle school, we came together in high school.
But you didn't know it.
But we didn't know it. I'm 2 years older, so different groups of friends. And our school district was so large that we had 2 high schools. So by the time Jimmy was in high school, I moved out of the school district. Isn't that just...
It's amazing. Yeah.
Wild?
Yeah.
We went in the same circles. we had many of the same interests. And through our life journey, we shared similar education interests, hobby interests. I think it's just pretty wild. It's been an incredible journey.
It's a really neat story. And the amazing parts about the genealogy, which I don't bother with the research, but what I understand from Kathleen's client and meeting them and also understanding the research that goes in behind it. But what is really interesting about genealogy is that a lot of people think it's all about the past, but it really is not. It's about the present. And so those connections, it's just absolutely amazing to have, you're digging in the past, but you're talking about your present.
And you know what's even more amazing, Charlotte, is John actually listens to me. I am like ready to tear up.
It floors me as well, because for an outsider who perhaps just this isn't as relevant to their life, my husband often gets confused because I talk in circles because I get so excited over my discoveries.
Yes,
But when he catches on to it, he's like, wow, that's really cool. I'll give you a snippet. Through my research, I found that my biological paternal grandmother was a twin that most of the family members did not know about, did not talk about the twin that had passed away, because there were 19 children in that family. And my biological father is one of 16 children.
Charlotte, I need you to start building with your own tree, because you have 19 people to work through on your father's.
Actually, because he's one of 16.
Yes.
And his mother was one of 19.
You need to do your family first. And I mean, going back to your great grandmother.
I'm having trouble finding enough information.
Catholic Church's records in Puerto Rico. All of it's going to be through your Catholic Church records, because in this case, remember, you're looking for a genealogical question. You're not looking at this point for all the family stories. Just get the genealogical question so you can build a tree. And that means birth, death, marriages. Start with your tree, then build out what we find out on Jimmy. When you start giving me those numbers, that changes my research plan. Let me ask you, do you have any other questions for me while we're here?
That's loaded.
Oh.
So
on this topic, Charlotte, on this topic only.
So that without having actual physical people to talk to about relatives, and without having the church records at my disposal, I'm going to be relying on trees that have already been posted on the websites, correct?
You are going to be using trees posted on the website, not relying on them because they may be incorrect.
Correct. I have to do my own research.
You're going to build your own trees, but most people know their parents and their grandparents. So that part you can use. But because you need to go another 2 generations, that's why you want to build out your trees.
All right.
Now,
so we're looking at Jimmy's paternal grandmother.
Yes, that's the level.
At some point lived in Puerto Rico.
And Jimmy's paternal grandmother may very well be related to you on your great-grandparents' side.
Got it.
Okay.
At some point, everybody lived on the mountain.
Exactly. Charlotte, I want to thank you for joining us here on Hittin the Bricks with Kathleen. And this has been fun because this is a fun ride. DNA is always something you take your time with, enjoy it, and bring people along with you as you're doing it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Been great,
you, John.
Charlotte. Got a great story. We're looking forward to updates.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, congratulations. You've made it to the end of another episode. Thanks so much for staying. Thanks to Charlotte from New York for spending some time with us. Thanks to Chewey Chewbacca Brandt, our part-time best boy and full-time squirrel-murdering psychopath, for his unwavering lack of interest in anything we're doing. The theme song for Hittin the Bricks was written and performed by Tony Fistknuckle and the Aphids. Look for their pictures on the wall at your local post office. You can find us on Buzzsprout and Spotify. We'd love to hear what you think about our podcast, so stop by our Facebook page at Hittin the Bricks and let us know.